can't hear you.
It's going to be discussion or we go one by one?
So initially it's one by one, and then
Okay. Okay. All right.
right, we are live. Hello, everyone. My name is Sourabhi Dutta Roy, and I welcome you all to the discussion series on working women in history, curated under TMYS Review June 2025, which is the first of the four projects themed on four distinct lenses to observe and understand the personal and social spheres of working women. We are calling for the submissions of essays, poems, and short stories under the project. To know more about our submission guidelines and the project architecture, please visit www.tellmeastory.biz. The topic for today is true crime and the legacy of the femme fatales. I consider myself extremely privileged to be in the company of our esteemed panelists, Ms. Jane Borges, Mr. Anirban Bhattacharyya, and Mr. Anand Jayshette, who will all shortly share their insights with us. Without further ado, then, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Our first speaker for the session is Mr. Anirban Bhattacharya. Mr. Bhattacharya wears many hats. He is the creator, producer, director, and writer of the hit TV show Southampton, India. He is also the producer of Crime Patrol and Fear Files. He is the best selling author of a true crime trilogy from Penguin that includes India's Money Heist, The Deadly Dozen, and Swipe Right to Kill. His memoir, The Hills Are Burning, about his growing up years in Kalimpong amidst the violence of the Gorkha Land Revolution in the late 80s, debuted at number one on Amazon USA and Australia. He has acted in movies, does stand up comedy, and is a motivational speaker. We're delighted to have you with us today, sir. Thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Our second speaker for the evening is Mr. Anand Jayshette, a dedicated faculty member of political science at the Maharashtra National Law University, Aurangabad. Mr. Jayshette is a prolific scholar with a global reach. His research interests span a wide spectrum encompassing political theory, Indian politics, subaltern studies, political sociology, civil society, and international relations. His passion for the intersection of humanities and technology, including artificial intelligence, is evident in his completion of a course on digital humanities offered by Harvard X. He has the distinguished experience of association with the international organizations like World Changing Center and United Nations Volunteers. Beyond his academic pursuits, he is a versatile individual with a deep appreciation for the arts. He has honed his skills as a Hindustani classical vocalist and harmonium player, demonstrating a harmonious blend of intellect and creativity. We are delighted to have you with us, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Moving on, our last speaker for the session is Ms. Jane Borges. Ms. Borges is a senior journalist, author, and oral activist. Her bylines have appeared in the Sunday Midday, The Swaddle, New Lines Magazine, Scroll, The Asian Age, and Muscat Daily. In 2022, she won the Reading Journalism Award. Her debut novel, Bombay Belchao 2019, was shortlisted for the Sahitya Academic Yuva Puraskar and Atta Galata Bangalore Literature Festival Book Prize. She has also co-authored the non-fiction Mafia Queens of Mumbai, Stories of Women from the Ganglands 2011 with S. Hussain Zaidi. A chapter from this book was adapted into the Bollywood film Gangubai by Sanjay Leela Bansali. She is the co-founder of Soboykar, an oral history archive chronicling the lives of Catholics who migrated from the Konkan to South Mumbai. She now lives in Mumbai. We are delighted to have you with us, ma'am. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sourabhi.
All right, I like to open the forum for discussion now. I would request Mr. Bhattacharya to take it over from here.
Right. So you want me to talk about the femme fatales that I have dealt with in my life? Guys,
So,
yeah. Tell me.
yes, like your insights on the topic.
My insight is there's a quote by Shakespeare which says that the female of the species is more dangerous than the male, and it's absolutely true in the true crime writing that I have been doing, and you know some of the women criminals that I have encountered and researched and written about are absolutely ruthless. And I guess it has to do with the fact that there is a very stereotypical image of the female, being the mother figure and the nurturer and the caretaker and the one who's more, emotional or empathetic. So that when crimes do take place, orchestrated by them, it comes across as far more jarring than when men do it. So that's one. The other thing, of course, is the voyeuristic angle to it. A femme fatale is so much more glamorous and enticing and mysterious figure than a man. you know and of course there's so many centuries of literature and history and social behavior and all of that, which have sort of influenced this image of the femme fatale being who she has now evolved, sort of into this figure. So when I was writing my first book, and of course, first of all, I just want to thank the place where I am streaming from. This is Tidal Waves. This is the bestest bookstore in Mumbai. If you're in Mumbai, please come to Tidal Waves. So I just hopped in here, and they were kind enough to let me stream. It's a fabulous venue. So thank you to Tidal Waves. So this was the first book that I wrote, The Deadly Dozen, which is about the serial killers of India, and that features many female serial killers, and some of them were absolutely brutal, especially the one in Pune, which is Anjana Bai, who teaches her daughters to be pickpockets, and then they kill babies, as decoys. So I guess that's the first thing that one encounters about femme fatales and women criminals. And of course, Jane has written a fabulous, I think, one of my most favorite true crime books, which I keep telling her, and I think she's got bored of hearing it also, which is Mafia Queens of Mumbai. I think is one of the finest true crime books written in the countries, and she has dealt with female criminals. So yeah, Jane, you want to talk about that, and your first reaction on sort of when you started discovering and researching these characters.
Yeah, it's very interesting, Anirban, when you opened and you used the Shakespeare quote. I remember Vishal Bharadwaj, who gave the foreword for a book, said the same thing about women, and the female of the species is deadlier. Um, what I kind of wasn't expecting, and when I remember, this is about 10 years ago, researching on, very, very specifically the mafia. So, women in the mafia. Um, I was expecting to gather a lot of material, a lot of information on women, but it is interesting how the erasure of women has just not been in the regular discourse, and where and how women occupy and inhabit spaces, but also in a space like crime, where there was so little material available on them, because it was just assumed um, um, that they couldn't have such a significant role in something like the mafia. There's one thing to commit crime, and then there's one thing to be involved in a larger syndicate and to be instrumental in shaping things and influencing how the syndicate operates. So I don't think there was um, I would say we've rather not been fair in the coverage of these women, and giving them the space that should have been given, to put them in the center and to understand why they did what they did. And I think that is why Mafia Queens of Mumbai stands out as one of those books that kind of surprised people, because they couldn't have imagined women occupy that space. And it was a big struggle for me. I remember when report like researching on them, because such little material, everything reduced to articles or perhaps FIR reports, or then oral narratives that were doing the rounds. But a very, very, very strong, very, very powerful woman, I would say, that I encountered through their families, through people who knew them. Many of them had passed on by the time I started researching. um, I found something interesting, that they did not commit crime for the sake of committing crime. They did not wield weapons. They did not use guns. They did not use hockey sticks, as you'd assume the men in the mafia do. And still such a powerful influence. And for me, that really stands out. So they were really the brains behind all the drama and the action. And that definitely makes them deadlier than the male.
Yeah, I think one of the key factors, before we ask Anand, one of the key factors between the kind of women criminals that I was dealing with in my book, and you were in yours, is the femme fatales, or the women criminals, were doing crime for greed and for money and all of that in my book, uh, which was the serial killers, and they were doing it for personal gain, and they were solo. But in your case, the astounding thing about mafia queens and figures of such is that they were actually head of a male dominant mafia. They were actually the heads of mafia groups that had predominantly male members. And here was these powerful figures who were ruling over that group. I mean, imagine the resilience and the strength and the kind of sort of dexterity and politicking that one had to sort of get into to be able to control that adrenaline, testosterone fueled gangs of the mafia of Mumbai.
And to
So
be
that
so
was,
sharp, yeah, and to be so sharp to be able to do that, you had to understand every person that you were dealing with, and how to use the manipulate to get work done. So I found that very, very interesting and very insightful.
hmm.
Right, we'll get back to that. Mr. Jayshette, if you could just share your perspectives on the topic as well.
Yeah, first of all, good evening to all, and thank you for having me. I would like to extend my gratitude to entire team of Tell Me Your Story. Not just for having me. I mean, obviously that is one of the reasons, but this panel discussion has opened up very important, the stream of research for me as well as for some other persons. The reason is, as I belong to political science field and working in the National Law University, this femme fatales has not been much research, so we can say that is quite under researched area from the academic perspective. Obviously this is one of the types of the literature and arts, but when I was going through the different references and the books, I could not find a very well researched, articulated theoretical perspectives on this area, specifically femme fatales. So thank you for organizing this. Going ahead, I'll just speak about two to three political instances or political examples in this context of femme fatales. First of all, see, this area of Kolkata has been criticized for using the or looking at the femininity from somewhat violent and lust related and all the negative attributes. So the first thing comes is about when we speak about this topic, we have to look at what were the examples coming from our own Indian context, and that led me back to the examples of Vishikanyas. So Vishikanyas, the mythological characters, were known for being used by the kings in order to poison or make the enemies poisonous. So here as well, we will find that the kings, probably considering our patriarchal system, were mainly the men, but they were using women in order to further their political ambitions. So this is something can be termed as weaponization of female identity. The identity of female is being used as the weapon to further the political ambitions of the male. The next example comes, and that is very famous example of Cleopatra. Here, the very famous queen of Egypt is ill famous for her affairs or relations. We can say romantic relations with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. So here as well, this political ambition of Queen Cleopatra is overshadowed by again the negative attributes, and her success is credited to not her personal characteristics or personality, but mainly to like manipulating or seducing the other kings. The third example would be that of the Matahari, again the famous one. Here as well, the romantic relation, her own, love for her career and her struggle from where she came is again overshadowed by, the alleged espionage. So here we can see from these two to three examples that the attributes that are related to the personalities of women are often used in negative ways through the femme fatales. But there are some feminist voices who are saying that the femme fatales cannot be looked only from the negative aspects, but this is one of the era, or these are the few women who have crossed so-called boundaries. They have come beyond, they have struggled a lot, and they have come and reached to this position as well. So we can look at it from the positive aspect as well, as women coming and going, coming beyond the social boundaries, so-called social boundaries, which require the courage, which require the valor, and this can be looked at from the positive perspective as well. uh, Lastly, I can say that as we have discussed, that the femme fatales can be criticized as well as looked from the perspective of empowering women. uh, this is mainly related to the struggle between the patriarchal control and female agency for the empowerment. So thank you for having me. Looking forward for further discussion.
Right, thank you, sir. My first question is for Ms. Borges. That the term femme fatale often evokes images of seductive and morally ambiguous women in literature and film, which we already talked about. So, based on your research, how accurately does this archetype reflect the real women involved in Mumbai's crime scene, and in what ways do their stories challenge or redefine this stereotype?
Yeah. Thank you so much again, Sourabhi. And again, I forgot to thank Tell Me Your Story for having me here, because it's such an honor to be on this interesting panel and for me to talk about women and crime. It's been a while since I researched on them, because the book came out in 2011. But it's nice to know that we are still, and it's important to know that we continue to talk about this, and in whether it is in academia or whether it is through journalism, through our works, through fiction, constantly challenge the ideas that we have and notions about femme fatale. um, the word femme fatale actually literally translates to lethal or deadly woman, if I'm not wrong. But for me, I think there are so many broader ideas that we are not looking at when it comes to this term. It is a very limiting term to me. And from my research, like I mentioned earlier, from the women at least I spoke to, they did not commit, nobody firstly committed crime for the sake of it, like blood, bloodshed for the sake of bloodshed. All of them come from circumstances that were very dire, or either to break out of a social system, and which they weren't able to, and then they resorted to crime, which is generally the way crime in a way operates. It comes from a very, very dull, dark space. But in the mafia, it's interesting when you see Dawood, for instance, or any other gangster. There was this need for power and this need to kind of control that brought them into that space. Not so much for these women. I think the way they operated, their backstories for me was very fascinating. Take for instance Jenabai Daruwali. She comes from, she has a large family to support. Partition decides to be in Mumbai in India instead of going to Pakistan, gets married the second time, but still doesn't find help from her partner, her spouse, and has this large family to support. Starts with, getting involved in the black market space for rice, for grain, and she's initially known as Chawal Wali, and then eventually to alcohol. And considering she's a Muslim woman, it is there is a lot of stigma attached to alcohol, but still gets this name attached to her, suffix to her name, Daruwali, and has no qualms in um, being addressed as that. And slowly and interestingly, because of the men that she's interacting with, gets comes into this space which we call the Bombay Mafia or the Mumbai Mafia. And from there, how she manages to wield control. And she is actually the godmother of the Mumbai Mafia, because everyone turned to her. She was either their mother, their sister, or a daughter, like, I don't think daughter, but mother and sister to any of them that we know of, be it Vardarajan Mudaliar, Kareem Lala, or say Dawood. And then there is someone like Sapna Didi, who's got into this only to take revenge for the murder of her husband, and then joins somebody like Hussein Ustara to learn how to wield a weapon so that she can murder the man who has killed her husband. It's a very, very solely, very, very focused crime that she wants to commit, and it is not because she wants to be part of this syndicate. Or then there is another interesting, the mobsters mall that we talk about, Monica Bedi, who is purely in love and simply in love and just joins her partner wherever he goes, very, very fully aware that he's a big gangster, and that he has all these crimes and all these murders attached to his name, but follows him blindly. So it's there is this emotional, what I feel, they're very emotionally charged and emotionally driven, even in their crimes, as women are often known to be. But this is not their weakness, this is their strength. And they really play to this particular strength of theirs. And I think that is what I discovered through my research and writing. And for me, femme fatale is so much more than a deadly woman. She is, uh, she is a mother, she's a sister, she is a power wielder, she's an influencer. She operated today, she would have been an influencer for sure. So that is what I feel, Surpi. These are my thoughts on it.
Right. Thank you, ma'am. My next question is for Mr. Bhattacharya. True crime often walks a fine line between informing audiences and romanticizing criminal behavior, especially with all the streaming platforms that is adapting true crime stories. What responsibilities do you think filmmakers have when portraying women as central figures in a crime story?
Yes. So, yes. First of all, thank you to Tell Me Your Story and to Coral, of course, who's one of the finest feminist writers in the country, and she writes about good women, I guess, while we write about the bad women. Thank you, Coral, and Tell Me Your Story for inviting us again to be part of this event. So, I think the responsibility is not to glamorize the crime, because one, as the way I so the way I write the stories is it's a no holds barred account of the crimes and the murders, and I was fortunate enough to have editors who understood the reason why I was doing it. I was not doing it to glamorize it, but I wanted the reader to get shocked and appalled by the level of crimes that these women were committing, so that they would really understand what the victim went through. Wherever there's a criminal, there's also the victim, and often we forget about the victim. So I wanted to, so there's a fine balance that one has to do without glamorizing the femme fatale, or the central female villain character. Stick to the truth, and of course then again, what Jane is talking about, the backstories of these women are fascinating. They do come from a place of adversity, whereas in Jane's case, um, the people that she were dealing with, they didn't commit crimes, for the sake of it. Whereas my serial killers, they went on a rampage. They were slamming down 5-month-old babies on the platform, or on the ground, to break their skulls, and to form a decoy when they were caught uh, pickpocketing. So these women cannot be ever be forgiven, however the adverse backstory that they have. They have made a choice in life, to do what they did, right? And they were heinous crimes. For example, in my new book, which is called Swipe Right to Kill, it's a story about this girl called Priya Seth, who was an absolutely fabulous student, a topper. She comes to Jaipur to study, sees Jaipur, the glamorous and the lights and of city life, and she becomes greedy. She wants a life well beyond her middle class, sort of realm of living, and decides to become a con woman. And she goes on to con 1,000 men on social media, right? Through Twitter, through Bumble, through Tinder, Instagram, whatever you have. She cons 1,000 men, and then goes on to murder one of them when she orchestrates a kidnapping that goes wrong. You know, she did not have an adverse backstory. She came from a lovely middle class family. Her father was a professor, well respected family. She chose that life. So as filmmakers, we have to present the truth without glamorizing, without that low angle shot, without that slow motion, without the hair blowing in the wind while she cuts off somebody's head. That immediately sort of gives you uh, you know the glamorous image of the femme fatale. So tell the truth as unbiased as can be. And taking off from this question, which I want to ask Jane, because her one of her stories from Mafia Queens, which was about Gangubai, was made into a feature. And so I did get that sense that, obviously, because it was a big budget film, Alia Bhatt was deliberately glamorized, and a lot of the crimes were then sort of sanitized, so to speak. Did you get a sense of that happening, Jane?
Of course, Anirban. So, sanitized is the word, exact word. And I think for Bollywood, it made her look more like Gangubai was a heroine. She was valorized, and all the flaws completely hidden, or covered in, or sugar coated. And I don't see that as problematic for the format that it is being made for, because it is only then that a film of this nature would work perhaps for Bollywood. But a more honest and authentic a piece of work would look at both sides of Gangubai, and that she was perhaps a heroine for or a hero for the sex workers that she kind of worked for, and who considered her as a mother figure, but she was also very ruthless. And that ruthlessness wasn't perhaps, unfortunately, not shown, because come on, I mean, even the business of sex work it is cutthroat. It is a system that is well oiled and needs to be continued. You can't have everyone and anyone who wants to leave, let them go, right? So Gangubai was a ruthless woman as well, and there were only bits and parts of her that were highlighted. I think what I feel is that movies and movie makers really focus on is valorizing and sexualizing women, and that is something that becomes, for me, is problematic. Sexualizing, most importantly, is because uh, again, there is so much to that woman, and there's so many shades that you completely erase, and choose to only focus, like the mobsters mall. If we think the iconic mobsters mall in the Hindi film in the 60s and 70s was someone who was gorgeous, beautiful, sexy, and voluptuous, and
and always attracted to the hero.
always attracted to the hero, and had this one item number, and that item number continues to this day, right? Irrespective. So are we seeing beyond that? I don't know if we're doing it as yet. Perhaps a lot of OTT is taking this far more seriously, but not mainstream Hindi cinema. I'll
Yeah.
specifically say Hindi cinema.
Yeah, I think the OTTs are doing a far better job of actually presenting the darker side of the woman criminal. I mean, if you have a series like, say, Baby Reindeer, which is on Netflix, when you see it, I mean, that really, it was uneasy to watch. Or one of the better made authentic series called Poshampa, which came, I think, on one of the OTT things, which was an adaptation of the Anjana Bai Seema Kavit, mother daughter story. That was again very very brutal. Um, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I guess Bollywood or the film industry sort of tends to take the easy route, whereas when the men are sort of criminals or the serial killers, then they are brutal as hell. Chopping up body parts like they're cutting Christmas cake. You know, so there is no problem with that. But it's the women sort of who don't get their due grisly dues on
I think
screen.
Curry and Cyanide did a good job. The show Curry and Cyanide, which spoke about the
Mm.
Kerala
Yeah, but
murders.
because it's a documentary, right? So
Yeah.
it's a documentary. So they didn't have the option to sort of glamorize it or fictionalize it, right?
Yes.
Right. Thank you so much. These are some brilliant insights to the behind the scenes. I would like to ask Mr. Jayshette, from a political science perspective, how do societal power structures and gender dynamics, would you say, influence the portrayal and perception of quote unquote femme fatales in true crime narratives, and what implications does this have for our understanding of gender roles in society?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to, thank Anirban ji and Jain ji for giving, different examples. See, I would like to go to very basics of, the power structure of the society, and that is, uh, see, this all is related to the stereotyping of the gender. So first, we need to understand the difference between the sex and gender. The sex is the biological term. The sex is the biological structure, whereas gender is something socially and politically constructed. So when we are looking at
Sir, I think your internet is. We can't hear you.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Sure.
Am I audible? Yeah.
Sure, sure.
So I
Yes.
was saying, when we are looking at men and women in society, we have to be able to distinguish between what are their biological attributes and what are the socially constructed ones. For example, let's not go to the femme fatales, but take the examples from our surrounding. When a girl student makes friendship with the boy from the same class, and when she asks or requests for the class notes, that is most of the times termed as the girl student or girlfriend is trying to make the friendship with the boy from the class by using her femininity and to lure the guy in order to get the notes. This is just one example. Again, the basic example can be what gifts we give to boys and girls on their birthdays. If we think of kids, usually the girls are given the teddy bears or the kitchen utensils so that they can be at the homes and play with those. Whereas most of the times for boys, the gifts are given that are bat and ball, the volleyball, so that they can go out and play on the grounds. It has the implications for their personalities, but what point I am trying to make is that the physical structure, the biological structure may give some attributes to the women, whereas the social attributes can be different, and that is related to gender. So, I'll again go back to the example of Cleopatra. See, Cleopatra, the queen, was trying to further her political ambitions by her own strategies that might or might not include her romantic affair. But aren't there any examples in the political history where the kings have used their romantic affairs as the weapon or strategy to further their political ambitions? There are many, but then why we speak only of those that were done by the queens? So we need to distinguish this. And the last point, based on this only, is that you asked me about the role of power structures. The sex idea or the the biological structure is the natural, is the original one. Whereas when we distinguish men and women into different genders, it comes with the distribution of power. It comes with the ideal type of women. It comes with the what we can say, the powerful strong men, whereas weak, emotional, submissive women. And these gender related ideas plays huge role when it comes to not only femme fatales but overall the women and their characterization, so called characterization, when it comes to the crimes.
All right. Um, Moving
Yeah,
on, my next.
I think what Anand was saying is so true, in a sense that because of the gender inequality, one, two is the patriarchal structure. Over thousands of years, it's like when the women do something better than the men or outwit the men at their own game, they are put into this bracket and label and saying, "Oh, they are femme fatales, or they are dangerous, or of loose moral values." So it's very easy to sort of put the women into that bracket and villainize them. you know yeah.
Right. Moving on to Ms. Borges, given an experience in both journalism and authorship, how do you approach the ethical considerations of portraying real life female criminals, especially in a society that may already hold biases against women in unconventional roles? which Sir already mentioned, just that there will always be the concept of bad women and stuff like that. So, your take on it?
It's an interesting question, actually, because when we wrote Mafia Queens of Mumbai, it was, one part of it was what my then editor and co-author Hussain Zaidi called faction, where we combined fiction and facts and wrote stories that were partly based on the true facts that we were able to gather, and fictionalized it to make it interesting and to read. But there was another set of stories for which we restricted, and we did just full length, long form journalistic pieces. Um, I think for me, when I was reporting, and I'm just talking about what I was doing at that time, because my work is limited to Mafia Queens of Mumbai, really, was I told you the challenge of not having enough on the woman. And this also comes, like I said, from perhaps not so deliberate but unconscious decision to erase the stories and voices of these women, because they were not considered significant enough, or they did not meet the standards of what you would call the mafia, right? Because when you think about mafia, you think about these hardcore men, like, fierce and aggressive and gun toting men, ruthless and just committing cold blooded murder, daylight crimes, and none of these women really fit that. So it was very easy to kind of sideline their stories, not let it be part of the mainstream, because like Mr. Anand Jayshette also said, that our gender constructs sometimes also come in the way in and the lens with which we see these people. So yeah, they did not fit. They maybe because they were not biologically or even I mean, because of biological limitations, I would assume that uh, um, and gender, these these became very restricted spaces of how you look at crime, criminals, and women criminals did not fit that space of the mafia. So for me, those challenges were there. I struggled to report, right? A lot of what we drew were from our interviews. So had to do long interviews with people who knew them, and then stitch these stories together. And we decided then that we will not put this out as a journalistic work, because there was no way to validate or fact check any of the material that we had, because of the lack of, obviously, material on them, or which was written on them previously. So everything was based, like Gangubai as a woman is someone who has who who who's actually reduced to a bust, in and photo frames in the houses of women in Kamatipura, and their mothers or their generation has the stories of Gangubai has passed down from generations, and there is very little, and what you get now is actually sieved through information. And how do you make sense of what is accurate and what is not, and how do you prove what really happened and what did not? So we had to kind of gather information from multiple sources to build these stories up and kind of stitch a portrait that was close to authentic, or close to represent or manage to represent what this person really was. And I think perhaps it makes me think that there is a lot more work that needs to be done in writing, revisiting stories of all kinds of people, and is should not be restricted to gender. And I'm glad Anirban, for instance, is doing a great job with his books and telling the stories as they are, without the lens, keeping the person as an individual who's committed the crime, without like in saying glorifying, valorizing, or sentimentalizing the stories of these women.
Right, right. Um,
Also, I think Jane, I think the difficulty why you had sort of difficulty in researching the material was these women also came from a very different era, where reportage wasn't as widely available or documented. As you know, most of the FIRs in India are handwritten, you know, and they get lost. They're not digitized. And I think that was one of the main reasons. Like when you look at the period that I was covering with my serial killers, which is Cyanide Malika and Anjana Bai, they are very, very well documented cases, because I think it's in the modern era, right? Post 90s, or the millennium. So I think that was one of the challenges that sort of was the cause for you not
Also,
getting.
Anirban, that makes me want to ask, say, earlier crime was the domain, or crime reporting was the domain of men. And I feel that could have played a very, very important role in what stories were told and what stories
Hmm,
weren't told. And I mean, and I'm talking about an era, right? I mean, it has changed. The way we look at things right now is so different. But
yeah,
I think that it was easy to sideline those stories, and
yeah,
convenient perhaps, because, like I said, they did not fit a construct of what
yeah,
a criminal should be.
yeah. and
So
and
yeah.
also and also a lot of these women that you've covered in the book preferred to stay under the radar.
Mm.
They weren't your flamboyant criminals, they weren't in your face. They went about their job just completely under the radar, silently did their job, and sort of even when
They did
when
not
when
do
the
it to kind of be in the limelight. That makes it
yeah,
also another
yeah.
kind of curious.
Even like when
Uh,
Janabai does the truce between Karim Lala and all of that, it's very under the radar. It's
mm,
sort of, come to the house and we shall talk. You know, so yeah, I think because of that as well, uh, it didn't sort of get the coverage
it didn't,
that
yeah.
it would. Yeah. Sorry, Sourabhi, we love chatting. I'm Bengali as well, and
No,
we're
no.
talking about and our favorite topic, blood, gore, and brains.
All right. All right. My next question is for you, Lisa. That as a producer of a hit crime show like Savdhan India, which is perhaps one of the most watched on Indian television, have you noticed any dissimilarities in the conviction, manner, or dynamics in which stories about men and women criminals are treated?
Yeah, of course. The law is very biased against the woman. I mean, sorry, against the man. It's a very pro-woman law. Um, and in a real case, I've had a friend, um, on whom multiple cases of domestic violence was falsely, put, and the cops then sort of took the side of the woman. The poor guy died. He passed away fighting the cases. So the law is very, very, pro woman, and there are women, of course, who are using it like to the hilt of filing false DV cases, false dowry cases, just to get the sort of the man into prison. Even for example, in Swipe Right to Kill, Priya Seth is caught multiple times by the police, but she's let go because she's a woman. She puts up this very sad face. Oh, I'm a college girl, and she breaks into an ATM. Like, she's caught red-handed breaking into an ATM with another man, right? I mean, it's there, and then she goes and she's, oh no, because but I'm a college girl and I got waylaid and this blah blah. I'm so sad. Oh, please help me. Ooh la la. And she goes within 24 hours. She's out of the jail. Um, and this happens repeatedly. You've got the cop in one of the documentaries, which a superb journalist called Deepika Narayan Bhardwaj, who's actually doing stellar work, for crimes against men perpetrated by women. So she fights for those cases. She was the first one who sort of exposed and got Priya Seth on camera. If you go onto YouTube and type in Priya Seth Tinder murder case, you'll see the documentary that she has made. And in within that documentary, you've got a woman constable saying, a woman inspector saying that Priya got away multiple times because she was a woman, and it was so difficult for us to convict her and to sort of uh, convince the judge that she needed to be put behind bars in one of the related cases. So, of course, the law is very, very biased. Um, and of course, in Southern India, when we show these cases, we try to be as authentic as possible. But Southern India does get into a bit of drama and does get into a bit of fictional uh, masala addition, you know. So it's not as procedural as a crime patrol is. You know, and both the shows I have produced. So Savdhan India, I created, produced, wrote, directed. Crime Patrol, I have produced and written. So this is very two distinct sort of schools of crime series. But yeah, there is definitely a bias, against the man.
Right. My next question is for Mr. Jayshette. In your academic work, you engage with critical thinking and research in public law. So, how can legal scholars and researchers use true crime narratives to highlight systematic issues in the justice system, particularly regarding gender bias in legal proceedings?
Yeah, see, the discussion that I left with, the difference between sex and gender uh, is also relevant here for the reason that see, just now Anirban spoke about how law is biased. I'll just speak a bit about implementation. So the investigating agencies are the people like those who are raised in the same patriarchal setup. So what happens is, apart from, I mean, just not go to the letters of the law, but since the beginning of investigation itself, so called as panchanama itself, the patriarchal stereotypes might come there, and it has happened many of the times. So, for example, if a crime done by women is less severe, probably that gets sympathy from the main investigating agencies. Um, but when the crime is very harsh in intensity, then investigating agencies might come, with their again the stereotypes, and might say, okay, so now women are becoming more cruel than men nowadays. So both the extremes, the earlier, which is the less severe, as well as the harsher one, both are problematic. Why? Because both these patriarchal stereotypes or patriarchal understandings of women, though sympathized or extremely criticized, may what we can say, dilute the exact intention behind the crime. So here, yes, nowadays there is criticism of laws for being mostly in favor of women, but I would, propose that we have to look at the criminals as the criminals. So when we are speaking, I know the setup that women and men are raised in our society is completely different. So we can't say completely that both men and women criminals will have the same context. No, I'm not making that statement. But as far as possible, we have to look at the crime as the crime. Here, one more, we can say scope is there for improving our justice administration or justice delivery system. In most of the Western countries, the investigating agencies have the criminal psychologists along with them in order to understand the exact psychological aspects behind the crimes. But in our system, we seldomly find that there are criminal psychologists. Actually, I was speaking to some personnel from the high level investigating agency, and I just asked that, do we really hire the criminal psychologist. Uh, the personnel said that no, we just hire them in cases where the criminals are suffering from extreme mental illness, but not in normal cases. So, while understanding the true narratives, what is to be defined as true narrative? The true narrative should come with the fine quality, the unbiased viewpoint of the crimes, I would say. And here, one more responsibility as being in the law university, I would feel that the legal scholars must come forward with their understanding, unbiased understanding of the crimes, and the government and investigating agencies must also try to uh, use their expertise, try to get their expertise as far as possible in order to make the laws, what we can say, not neutral, but more justified ones, instead of looking at them as in favor or against of any of the either genders.
Right. Moving on, Miss Borges, in your exploration of Mumbai's underworld, what did you find most surprising or unexpected about the roles women played, and how do their stories challenge traditional narratives about power and agency in the world of crime?
Um, I think I've perhaps already answered parts of these in my previous, responses. But what did I find most surprising in my coverage of the underworld? I'm thinking. Um, I can talk about perhaps one of the more intriguing characters for me. And I think this also alludes to what Anirban says. They did not want to really, they worked quietly and weren't really invested in attention seeking, which is a very very common criminal behavior, to draw attention to yourself. But I don't think they were really concerned with that, and that was for me very surprising. As a fact, they wanted to commit the crime, and that is how they kind of operated. They did not believe in being in drawing too much attention to themselves. And one character that comes to my mind is Papa Money. Papa Money used to sell puris, and cocaine in these small little bags in these what you call as puris. And you could sell it for 10 rupees, 15 rupees. Obviously, the cost has inflated with inflation, and I don't know how much it costs today. But I remember trying to, or wanting to, meet Papa Money, and using all possible sources to go and find this woman who lived in Sayan Kolivada. Um, and I remember using an anti-narcotic cell officer. Remember using a person who worked very closely with Papa Money. But Papa Money had, these moles that she kept, who also called themselves Papa Money. And she herself she would sell puris as a vegetable vendor. So she sold potatoes and onions, and people who wanted to buy her puris would go to buy her potatoes and onions, and then also get puris from there. And there were so many Papa Manis in Sion where she operated, and I found that very fascinating, because she did not want to draw attention to herself. So even if somebody has to go and buy puris, they have to find the real Papa Mani. It is just not the challenge of the journalist, but also the person who is going to get what they want from this person. So she's looking only for authentic buyers, to my mind. And I found that as a very very interesting way to operate in the business of drug peddling. Also, these moles, when the cops came and raided, the moles would come in front and say, "I am Papa Money, you arrest me," and that would give enough time for the real Papa Money to flee from the scene. So wow, it was just pure I mean, the mind for me is again, that the mind at work is what is so fascinating. And they are really the brains. Like I said, they really had the brains. Perhaps um, would not so much as use weaponry to command so much respect in the mafia, but use their brains to draw to kind of wield the influence that they did. So for me, that was very surprising and very interesting. And Papa Money becomes a very interesting case. I had to go to Cyan and buy lots of potatoes and onions till I finally got the opportunity to meet her. And wow, it just kind of makes me think, without valorizing or glorifying them, like how would you think of this when you are operating a business like this? Because it just makes it look like the command and control that they have is not is so well thought of, so well planned. And for me, that was very interesting.
Right, that is actually a very fascinating story. Moving on to Mr. Bhattacharya, I would like to bring in your book, Swipe Right to Kill, that where you tackle the intersection of modern technology and crime. And with the surge of dating apps in recent years, how would you say what would you say that the anonymity and convenience provided by dating apps have changed the dynamics of true crime?
Yeah, so I think the anonymity that social media or the internet offers, it's not just true crime. It has changed everything. You have trolls who can abuse your mother and run away, and you'll never be able to catch them. So it's not just true crime, but it has completely changed the way we interact with each other. There is no sense of responsibility, accountability. Anybody can say and do anything and get away with it, right? I think the technology is is by the by. If a criminal, if a person has criminal intent, they will commit a crime, whether there is technology or no technology, right? So a lot of the people say, oh, because of the anonymity of the web, this has happened. No, it's just an instrument of committing the crime. The person always had the intention to become a criminal. I mean, when you look at a person like Cyanide Malika, what Jane was talking about, the brains of a criminal, is when you look at someone like Cyanide Malika, um, she was one of the sharpest women criminals that I have encountered, because she figured out who were vulnerable. She knew that women were vulnerable targets, so she decided to target women. Where are we the most vulnerable? We are most vulnerable at a place of worship. We either go there in a sense of euphoria and happiness to thank God, or we go there in complete desolation and complete depression to ask for help from the superior power. So she knows that we are the most vulnerable at a temple or a place of worship. So she decides to target women at a place of worship. Next, she takes it another level. When she befriends the women, she asks them what the problem is. So each woman then shares her problem. For example, I've been married for 15 years and I'm unable to conceive a child, and my mother-in-law is making my life hell. Or I'm having relationship problem, or I have whatever, a disease. And what Malika does very cleverly is she identifies various temples in the state which deal with certain things. Like when you want to get pregnant, you go to a certain temple or a church or a mazhar or wherever, right? I mean, you have these what we call the living temples, right, or the living gods and goddesses. If you have some disease, then you go to a certain place to drink the water from that temple and it will cure you. So she then tells the woman, meet me at that place. So the woman completely sort of falls into her trap and goes there wears the finest of clothes to do a special puja, and that's where Malika kills her off. But look at the ingenuity of this woman who is illiterate, but she thinks way beyond her own realm of existence to sort of trap these women. So technology is a much later kind of a thing, you know. A woman, a criminal will be a criminal, and it's just whether he or she uses the gun or the knife. That remains to be seen.
Right. My last question is for Mr. Jayshette. What role do you think law schools and universities should play in promoting more nuanced discussions around criminal behavior, particularly in how society interprets female criminals in legal contexts?
Yeah, this is very interesting question because the national law schools particularly are very famous for their what we can say autonomy. So this autonomy can be utilized for creating the awareness. For example, in most of the law courts, there are film clubs, but the film club should not stop at just watching the films, right? That is just half part of it. But the student should know the skill of film appreciation, right? So the films are not to be watched just to watch, but they are watched to be learned, they are watched to be understand how the society progresses, what is happening in society. Another thing is there is need to have the open debate, open discussion about the application of feminist theories amongst the students as well as faculties. There are some points or some classes in which the feminist theory is taught, but feminist theory is not just to be taught, it is to be used as the lens to understand our surrounding. And that is where the role of the faculties and the administration comes, because uh, it is not just a part of syllabus, but the faculties must get the students outside of the classes and teach them how to look at the surrounding, how to look at the people from different perspectives, right? The third aspect I have already spoken about, criminal psychologists, or the need to understand the psychological aspects behind any crime. Another very important thing is public advocacy. The students and faculties of different law schools and universities must go outside. They should be involved in the pro bono work and legal aid in order to sensitize the people, in order to spread the gender related awareness amongst mostly those who are uneducated ones. uh, I think these are the few things which can be done through the law schools and universities in order to understand the criminal behavior and make the laws what we can say gender neutral.
Right. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I thank all the panelists once again for joining us this evening and for sharing their invaluable perspectives. This is to remind our viewers once again that we are calling for submissions on the project. Please visit www.tellmeyourstory.biz for further details. We'll come back to you soon with our next panel discussion. Until then, goodbye and good night.
Okay, thank you and goodbye.
Thank you so much for having us. Just a word of farewell is for all of you who are watching, who are readers. Please support local bookstores. If you are buying 10 books a year, ensure that you buy 5 from your local bookstore, and 5 you can get at big discount from Amazon and online, and that's fine. But please support your local bookstore, because if you don't support your local bookstore, then you will not have the pleasure of the smell of books when you buy them. right? So be good, keep reading. Thank you.
And may I add your please support Indian authors?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I saw a Facebook post of someone who read 103 books last year, and I asked that person. I said, "How many of them are Indian authors?" He said two. I said, "No, but they're not. They're of Indian origin. They currently hold one. One is born in Kenya, and the other one is now an American citizen. So they're not in 103 books and not one Indian author. So yeah, that's the way it is." Yes, we write well.
Yes, we definitely do.
And also, there is a need to organize such panel discussions as organized by Tell Me Your Story.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All
Thank
right.
you, Koral, and thank you, Surbhi, for moderating the panel and with these very insightful questions, actually.
Thank you
It's a
so
pleasure,
much.
ma'am. Thank you for such wonderful messages, ending messages. Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Good night.